Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Doug Pulaski. I'll be moderating. We want this to be very interactive. Please use the chat feature on the GoToWebinar console. I'm going to be introducing the presenter and the person that's going to be doing the demonstration in just a second. But like I said, I want this to be interactive, so just hit chat. We will be pausing throughout the session. This is one of many platform demonstrations. We're a unique platform company, the way we're pre-integrated with JD Edwards, and we've been working in the JD Edwards space for about 14 years. So if there's other areas of the business with the platform scenarios focused on procurement and HR, just let us know. But today's going to be predominantly a demonstration. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the presenter, Grant Smith. Grant, go right ahead.
Well, thank you very much, Doug. And thank you all for signing up and spending an hour with us. You won't spend much time with me. The majority of the time will be spent with Jeremy, who will be doing a live demonstration in front of you. And we'll get to the details of that. But to get to what we want to talk about today, and low code specifically, let's frame the issue and why this is here, and what does it do to address the problem. We'll talk a little bit about us, but really the majority of this is going to be you watching us build an application right in front of your eyes against JD Edwards itself. So this is where we are right now. So in the last 5 years, what have we seen? IT headcount has been stagnant to lightly rising, roughly around 9%. But demand for new applications has risen over 500%. And that is hard enough to have an IT headcount that isn't growing with demand. But it becomes much and geometrically worse as the skills gap widens every day. And I want to talk about that first. What do I mean by the skills gap itself? Now, if any of you were here or who had JD Edwards for 20 or 25 years, you might remember this. The original language that JD Edwards was written in. There weren't many at the time. This was the one they chose. It ran on the AS400. But this is where we are today. There are so many languages to choose from and so many things to do and so many different ways to try and accomplish the same thing and so many different skills required to just do one thing. It has become overwhelming. And on top of that, it's hard to find people to do all of this. So, just doing a search on Twitter, programming is like peeling an onion. After peeling the layers, you're all crying. It's a true statement. It's so much more difficult. And this is from August 5th, but I found one very similar that was actually from 2011. Programming has gotten more and more difficult in the last decade than it ever has in the 30 to 40 years beforehand. So we have less people doing this, and it's harder to do. And on top of that, programmers themselves are constantly chasing alpha. And I'll let you read that quote. And so they're always looking for, how can I upskill my resume? And sometimes to the detriment of the business to which they're working for. So it becomes more and more difficult for developers to stay on track as new frameworks, new languages, new techniques come out on an almost hourly basis to do approximately sometimes the exact same thing, just in a different way. So it becomes harder in that regard as well. It's harder to choose. So that is when I talk about that skills gap. That's really what I'm talking about. Is it's hard to find people to do all of these things. Like if you have a home, you don't let your electrician do the drywall, and you don't let your plumber do the lighting, because they're experts in specific parts. Finding experts in multiple languages is incredibly difficult. And I'll show you here why I'm saying that. So the Bureau of Labor Statistics says there's not enough people to do this. And there are the groups of people who say, well, we can find a full stack developer. Well, that's not easy either, because there are more job openings for full stack developers than there are people on LinkedIn who say they are full stack developers. So you still need to understand all the moving parts behind all of this. So as we sit here with less people qualified to do IT jobs and more languages to choose from to glue together to create applications for a user demand that's gone up fivefold in the last 5 years, it's a difficult situation. So enter the vacuum are a group of software companies who coin themselves low-code vendors. And what they are doing is trying to make it easier for people to do development. There's two flavors of it. There's citizen developers, and those people are people who are building charts and graphs and sometimes some project management stuff, usually just OLAP applications. And there's tools for AD&D pros where we fit pretty squarely in. And these are for people who want to write transactional systems against multiple databases. But the analysts started getting on the bandwagon, and now it's a kind of a big cocktail party. And where we sit, and what Doug said earlier, is we have this look into JD Edwards unlike any of the other vendors that sit here. But what does it do? Really, in its core sense, it automates. It automates the mundane tasks of programming. It makes doing the job easier. So when I say that, how am I saying that? So instead of writing tons and tons of lines of code or downloading frameworks that have tons of lines of code that you don't know anything about, you use more declarative set of services like in a workflow type context. So I create an application that involves simple objects that I can put operators in to allow actions to take place. And I have a WYSIWYG editor to create all my screens, whether it be mobile or web or even as web services. So we've taken the complexities out of binding languages together, integrating them into an ERP or a custom system, and elevate the capability of a programmer to not have to understand any of those things. So, back to this chart, how does it help? So there's two parts, right? There's far fewer skills to master. So I don't need to know HTML, JavaScript, Ajax, C Sharp, etc. So I can take that skills gap and I can compress that to 0. And it's a lot faster than traditional programming. And I think you'll see that in the next 40 minutes or so when Jeremy is developing this application. So I can start to take the staff that I have and get them to keep up with the demand that I'm seeing, from our business users. And that's the addressable part is for less than the cost of a programmer. I can take an existing staff and make them 2 and 3 times more powerful, just learning one thing. A little bit about us and how we're all formulated. So here is, not everyone has all of these things. A lot of people have some of them though. So where we come and sit in is we have connectors to all of these systems, whether it be web service based, API, or certified. That's how we operate. And on top of that, we have a logic engine that allows you to create new logic, call the existing logic that is there, and a very robust workflow engine if you're writing applications that require workflow as well. And from an output perspective, these developers can create browser-based applications, mobile web applications, as well as headless applications as web services. So without knowing all the complexities behind that, I've taken someone who maybe just knows JDE tools, maybe just knows C#, or maybe just knows some HTML, and allow them to develop transactional applications against all of the systems in our current or in your current ecosystem. And that's important to do. One of the myths about low-code is you can do things, but once it gets complex, you can't do it. I just wanted to dispel that here in a single slide. Back to this screen I just showed you earlier. These are some of the applications that K-Rise has built with the platform that you're going to see today. Just a smattering of some of them. and it goes everywhere from e-commerce to product lifecycle management through big data. There's a lot of hyper complicated applications that integrate and require new logic as well, and we've tackled all of those. So I would ask you to challenge us if you think, oh, I have this system, but you couldn't handle it, it's too much. We welcome those challenges. And one more thing before I pass it over to Jeremy. There's a couple ideas for y'all to take home. So what can I do in less than a week with a platform like this? What can I do in a week to a few months with a platform like this? And as an ongoing, what can I do? Right? So in less than a week, I can replace spreadsheets. I mean, if you have spreadsheets or paper running around your organization, you can replace them. Every spreadsheet should be a system. If you're in charge of data security and you have spreadsheets flying around your office, your data security's got a hole. But it was hard to build applications before. If I could do it in an hour, right, it'd be much easier to do. And replacing potentially accessed databases that you know exist or even perhaps don't know exist with systems that have a legitimate database and can be accurately reported on. So in a week to 2 months, I can start creating workflow applications. I can start replacing aging systems. If you have some old VB6 apps, some old Visual Fox Pro apps, old Lotus Notes, things that just are there that you're afraid to touch, but need replacing over time, these are things you can do in a couple of months. And then further extending your ERP to customers and field staff. From an ongoing perspective, starting that road to digital transformation. And I know this is perhaps a controversial term, but start preparing for life after JDE. There is a path forward if I can create new applications against JDE, but then I can also take to other places. This is a platform that could have tremendous benefit for you, as well as building potentially a disruptive application. And if you have an idea for, I think this will grow our business 600%, but I think it'll take 2 years to build. But in a low-code platform, it might take 3 months. It might be worth trying because the risk has been mitigated so much by using a platform such as ours that if it doesn't work, you haven't expended that many man hours. And if it does work, right, you're a hero. But really, what we want to see out of our customers, we want to see out of the people that are here, is to become the team of yes. To become the team that says, sure, we'll do that. Yeah, we can do that. You'll have it next week. You'll have it in an hour. I'll finish it in 10 minutes. And to get realigned with the users, to get a seat at the table to do the things when they're talking about next year's projects, that you can say, we have the tools necessary to do anything. When you get new customers, you get new trading partners, we can communicate with them. We can build the systems that you need almost instantaneously. So that said, we're going to show you something. We're going to build an application from scratch. It gets customers directly out of Edwards. You can view the customer details. It will allow the user to edit those customer details and update JDE and Salesforce. And if we have enough time, and I think we do, you'll be able to view the customer's orders as well. So with that said, I'm going to pass it over to Jeremy, and Jeremy will be doing the rest of the demonstration.
Okay, this is Doug, the moderator, and once again, please use chat, and I'll use that as Jeremy goes through to answer those questions. And this, by the way, is being recorded. We plan on being done in less than an hour from the 1 o'clock Central start. If we do go over a few minutes, it's going to be recorded, so we'll be packaging it up and sending it to all registrants. Jeremy, go right ahead.
All right, hi everybody. I'm going to start taking us through the demo. What I wanted to start with is showing you what our end product is going to be, so you kind of have an idea of what we're building towards. I can't stop at every point that we're going to be doing work, but if you have it in your head ahead of time, you may be able to follow along. So I'm going to go ahead and log in. What I did is I logged in as Paul Johnson, a sales rep that we use, and this is going to be the final product that we're looking for, that we're going to end up building out. So the first screen you end up seeing is all the accounts that Paul Johnson has within our JDE, and he's assigned to them using a category code. I have the ability to search on those accounts. I can go ahead and filter down. I have the ability to go ahead and click into the company and update their address book information. So this is coming straight from JDE's address book tables.
Both address book and Salesforce.
Correct. And I have the ability to view the user's orders, the customer's orders, right? So I can go through, I have a sales order filter that I can drill down to any order I want. In addition, I have a date filter that will filter on the order date. It gives me a quick reference of how much they ordered, what item, and the status it's currently in. So that's going to be what we're building out. And I'm going to go ahead and switch over to the application development platform that we're going to use. So let me log out of here and switch over to the IDE. That is a fresh one. Log in with my admin. So if you sign up with us and you do the web-based IDE, you'll be given a tenant and you'll be given an admin account to log into that tenant. So I'll log in here, and what you're going to see is what you're going to be seeing for the first time. So if I go to applications, I currently just have two applications. I have an IDE application, which is the entirety of the tool set that we're going to be using, and the identity and access management application, which handles users and any sort of special conditions for those users, how they're set up, and all that. So these are the two that come out of the box, and we need to go ahead and create a new one. I'm going to go ahead and call it webinar demo. And all I need to do is hit add. And it's going to go ahead and create itself in the background. And there we go. There's my new application development environment. So what this gives me is a self-contained URL. Everything that I build within this development environment will be published to this URL. I have control over this. It has its own users, its own security, its own source control, and everything. So this is going to be our webinar demo that we're going to build in. As you can see, I have access to a whole bunch of different settings in here. Like I mentioned, users. I can go back to my older applications, logs for the application, some training stuff. We're going to be working in the development section, but that has some other tools. And farther down, we have some configuration settings and application settings and all that. I'm going to go ahead into Webparts, and we're going to start building. We currently have no Webparts. It's a fresh application. So the first thing I need to do is create that entry screen, that My Account screen. So we're going to go ahead and start with that. I do want to use this as a web page because the user is going to access it that way. And everything else is fine. I don't need to mess with it. I'm going to hit add. It's going to create my new web part. And then we're going to go into the design canvas. So what you have here is an empty web part. This is brand new application home screen. It's the web page that we're going to be building. If you have any reference to HTML coding or designing, what you're looking at is just a table. And currently we just have a blank screen, essentially, is what we're working with. So I can go ahead and add more tables to a table. I can add more columns to it. I can keep going. I can have as much as I want inside of these and build out the format how I want. I can pull in fields. And we have controls that are out of the box, just pre-built here and ready for you to fill out the information. So it's pretty free form. You can do what you need, but we're going to go ahead and try and do it through the data. So I'm going to go ahead and just remove this as I don't need any of this in my web part. Go ahead and clean this up. We're going to go back down to a 1x1, and I'm going to create a data source. So a data source is where we get our information, how we build our lists. This is going to be the process canvas. So if the web part canvas is how we see things, the process canvas is how we get logic and data. So the first thing I need to do in building this data source is go to JDE and get my data. I'm going to do that through database services. So if I go down here to my inquire service and I click on it, and it's kind of small so you may not be able to see it, but there's three here. One called app data, which is the database that the IDE resides on. And we have a JDE control and a JDE data database available. So the JDE data database is something that was set up beforehand and is already connected to my application. It's a one-time setup, and as long as it's set up for the IDE, all the applications available through that IDE will have it set up for you. So I can just go ahead and click and drag onto my canvas, connect it up to my start, and we're good to go. So now I'm going to open up the inquire, and that's going to take me to the service canvas. So now that I'm inside of the inquire, you can see that my database type and my connection string are already pre-filled because I dragged in the JDE data. And all I need to do is fill out the table, the select clause, and the where clause. We're essentially building a query here. So under file name, this is going to be the table or my from part of the query. And up in the upper right, we have a couple selections. So I'm going to go ahead and just click on commonly used, which pulls up some JDE tables that we want to use. I can also click on all tables to pull everything from JDE, but I'm not going to do that right now. It's going to be a lot. So I'm going to go ahead and pull in the address book table. I then need to add some keys, so our where clause. So what we're going to end up we're going to filter on is that cat code I talked about. So it's actually cat code 2 in our JDE. I'm going to drag that in. And then I need a value. So when the sales reps log in, what we've done is tied a variable to their login, and we call it sales region. That's what gets dumped into the category code 2. So I can have multiple sales reps log into the same Webparts and view different data based on that field. So what I need to do is actually go into the configs here, and we have that set up. That was set up in the security application, so I'm just going to go ahead and pull in the sales region. Last thing I need to do is pull in my results, so the data that we actually saw on the page. And that's going to be the address book number and the alpha name. So now that I have that, my data source is complete. I can go back to my web part, and we're going to add the fields to our web page so that we can actually view them. So all I need to do is go to data sources down here. We see the data source I just built. I'm going to drag the inquire over to my table. So now it opens up the wizard that will let me create my form or my list based on the data that I selected. So I'm going to go ahead and select all. Obviously, I wanted both of those fields. I'm going to update the description so that when it displays on the page, it actually says what we want it to instead of the JDE columns. And then I'm going to make this a hyperlink because we're going to be using this and to open up that address book data like we saw. So I want to create a list because this is going to be multiple lines of data automatically set up for me. And there we go. That's all created. If I go into desktop view to test it, I can see that I'm pulling in my address book data real time from JDE. And I have my hyperlink. My hyperlink isn't going to do anything because I haven't told it to do anything yet, but it's there. And I can actually go to phone view to view it as you would see it on your phone as well. Let me go back to Canvas.
So Jeremy, you're saying the responsive design built in, right?
Built in right here, and you can see how it works, shortening the fields and making it fit that form factor of the phone. So if I go back to the Canvas, we're going to go ahead and move on to part 2 here, and we're going to set up that window, that pop-up that we saw to edit the data. To do that, I need to edit this hyperlink, and on the right-hand side, you can see the properties that we're going to use to do that. So I need to go ahead and tell it to open a window. I need to tell it a web part name that it's going to open. Now, we haven't created that web part yet, but I'm going to call it account details, so I can go ahead and skip a step and just type that in for myself. I could also use the helper to look it up, but like I said, we haven't created it, so it's not there quite yet. And then additionally, we need to tell it what address book number it's opening, because we're going to click on that link as it pertains to a line, and it needs to pass the address book number to the window so we can pull the data. So I'm going to go ahead and set a parameter that we're going to pass through, and that's what it's going to be named, and then I need to pass what the value is, and we need to pull that from our data source. So I'm going to edit here, I'm going to click on dynamic, and I'm going to go to our data source that we built. I'm going to use the helper to go into the inquire that we set up and choose the address book number. So now that that's all set up, when I click on that link, it's going to open a window. It's going to pass the address book number to that window, and that window with that web part we configured can go ahead and pull the data as we need. So with all that done, we're done with this web part for now, and I need to create a new one called account details because that's what we named it before. I do not need it to use it as a web page, so I'm going to go ahead and turn that off. I'm going to hit add. And there's our new web part. So I'm going to go ahead and into design, and we're going to get that same web part canvas, empty web part canvas as before. I need to do one extra step here because we did tell it that it's going to be getting a variable passed through, so I want to define that here so I can use it elsewhere pretty easily. So I've done that now. And then we're going to start by adding a data source again. So for this data source, we have the option of using the inquire service again. I can, I forgot to click on JDE data, there we go. I can go into it and I can build a query that'll pull the address book data that I want. Right? So I could go ahead and search on F0101 and using the query builder, go ahead and pull that information in and pull in F0116, and then I can combine, do my joins, hit save and close. It's built that query for me, and then I can build out the results and do it that way. But in this case, it's actually going to be a lot faster to just go ahead and use a business function to do that. So I'm going to instead use our business functionality and get the data that way. So I'm just going to hook this up, open this up. So now, because I've pulled this in from an existing setup, I have a whole bunch of information already ready for me. I know that this business function service is going to work. I just need to tell it which business function to call. So we have a helper down here that lets you do that. And the one that we want is address book master MBF. By hitting retrieve, it goes to JDE and pulls that business function code for me. I can select and copy it and paste it into my call method to use it. To use this business function as a data source, the only thing I need to do is pass in that address book number that we pass through to the window. So to do that, I'm just going to click on webput, and there's my query string that we defined. I'll go ahead and drag that into the business function. And that's all I need to do. So now my data source is done. These can sit out here. As long as I don't have anything connected, they won't interfere with anything. They won't run or anything like that. So I'm going to go back to the web part, go back to my data sources, and here's my call business function service. And you can see that there's all those parameters that we had in that business function. So I'm going to go ahead and drag that over to my table, and we're going to start setting up our form. Now, because this is only going to be ever pulling back one set of data, I can create it as a form, and I want the user to be able to edit it. I need to do 12 fields from this because that's what this business function requires to send it back to JDE. And those 12 fields are going to end up being address book number, tax ID, search type, alpha name, mailing name, business unit, and we're going to edit address book line 1 here. Postal code, city, state, country, and account representative. And now that I have everything selected, I can go ahead and start setting up the descriptions if I want. This is just how it's going to end up appearing when I load it into the page for my descriptions. But I can go all the way down if I wanted to, but to save some time, I'm just going to go ahead and set up the address line 1. Now I want that to be a text field so the user can type into it and edit it on behalf of their customer. And that's it. I mean, we could set this up more, but for the sake of this demo, we're going to go ahead and call that done. So I'm going to create form, and that went ahead and added all those fields into my form for me. Now what I need to do here at the bottom is have that button that lets me submit the form. So I need to add one more cell. Now I have that. I'm going to go to my controls and pull a button in. And that is ready to go. So buttons can have processes as well. And it's going to let me control what's going on when it's clicked. And in this case, what I want this button to do is update the address book data in JDE. And in addition, we're going to update Salesforce at the same time. So to do that, I can use the same business function service. And actually, we're going to use the same business function method that we pulled up earlier. I have that already, so I just paste it. For this business function to do a change, I have to set up some static parameters because it's not super simple, but 3 values, and that's all it needs. The last thing I need to do here to get this business function to work is pull in all those parameters that I set up previously onto the form. Like I said, this business function does require 12 values to actually submit it properly. So bear with me as I set this up. Go to business unit. Thankfully, the Salesforce update's a little bit quicker. Don't want to miss postal code there. Country, and one more after that. All right, perfect. We go back, everything's good. All right, so now this is set up. I'm going to go ahead and pull in my Salesforce services. And I need to do 2 things. I need to look up the ID of the Salesforce account because obviously JDE and Salesforce aren't using the same thing here. So I'm going to pull in a Salesforce inquire, which is going to let me pull the data out of Salesforce. Again, this is already pre-set up for me. The only thing I need to do is pass in the name of the account we're going to be using. And in this case, the name of the account in Salesforce is the same as the address book number. And I need to go ahead and get that Salesforce ID so I can update this later. So there's my ID column. So that inquiry is all set up for me. Then the last thing I need to do is do a Salesforce update. Connect this here. I do need to pass in that ID from our previous service, so I can go ahead here on my right-hand side. Wrong one. I need the inquire. Drag in the ID. That puts that in there, and the property we're going to update is that address line 1 field, which in Salesforce is Billing Street. The value is going to be from our address line 1 field on the page. So all that is done, my button is almost complete. I do want it to do one extra thing. We're going to have it close the window and inform the user that the update had completed successfully. So I can do that with set terminate actions. Out of the box, set terminate actions automatically closes the window for me. It's set to yes there, but I do want it to show a pop-up message just so the user knows what happened. And we'll just go ahead and throw that. So that's it, my button is complete. I'll hook up the terminate. And to test this, what I need to do is log in as a user. Because we set up that parameter in the beginning to look for that category code 2, I need to have a valid user so I can come in and test this properly. So to do that, I need to go back to my IDE. I'm going to go back to applications. And right here, I have the login, the URL for that application. So I need to go ahead and open up a separate instance of the browser here. And by going here, I know I have a user, a sales rep user to test with that was set up in the security module. So I can go ahead and log in as them. And what I should see is the Webparts that we just created. So there's the application we just made, that webinar demo. This is that first screen that we made. And I should be able to go ahead and click on any of these and get my data. Oh, now I missed two things. One, the styling, I need to apply that. And two, the button needs to have its text. So let's go back to the IDE and set those up very quickly. Let's go to this web part. So the button was missing text, so we're going to go ahead and give it text. And the styling for mobile was turned off, so I'm going to go ahead and turn that on. It's under responsive design here. So we have a quick setup for the responsive design to kind of show those details. So if I go back here as the user, I should now be able to click on any of these, and we'll see both those changes. So there's my styling, and there's my button text. So good. So now what I'm going to do is put in our search functionality. So the original had a search box up here that let me drill down to specific address books. I'm going to go ahead and do that. Let's go back to our first web part. That's where I want it. To do it, I need a space up here on my web part canvas to insert those boxes. So I'm just going to add in one more table section, a cell. I want to put it up here, so I'm going to drag my entire list down so I can open up this section here. And I need to bring in a table because I want two cells to input this text box and this button. So there's my search button, and here's my text input. So for the text box, we're going to go ahead and put in some helper text for, address number. And for my button, well, I missed the text last time, so let's not miss it this time. Put in search. And I need to tell my button what to do. So by default, the IDE, the buttons, they don't do anything. They're just clickable things, but they don't do anything. So we need to make sure that it knows what to do when it's pressed. And to do that, I want it to run a data source. I want it to rerun the data source that we set up previously. So I'm going to drag in a service that'll let us do that. I'm going to go ahead and add the data source here so that it knows which one to do. If I had multiple data sources, obviously I could set that up as well, but we just have the one on this. So my button is done to set up my filter. I now need to make sure that my data source knows what to do with my new search filter box. So I'm going to go in here, go back to the inquire, and all I need to do is add one more key to filter off of that address book number. So we're going to go to our columns, and we're going to pull in the address book number, so we filter off that column. The value I wanted to use is going to be that text box. So this process was open before we created that text box, so I need to go ahead and refresh my input. And there's my text box that we added. And And last thing I need is I needed to ignore blanks, because otherwise it would assume that the filter we're trying to pass through is blank and then apply it and we won't get anything back. So that should do it for the search. Let's go back here and refresh. So there's my search functionality. So we did notice that the search box tried to match the page width, so I can go ahead and fix that really quick. If I go back to my web part here, click on my table, because this is the width I want to set. Scroll down to the bottom. So we can see it's set to 100%. I can just set that to 20%, and that should pull that search button right over. Perfect. So now I should be able to filter down to the users that I want to go ahead and update. So 4242 is the user we're going to use to update both JDE and Salesforce. So this is the current information that we have in JDE and Salesforce, and to prove that, I'm going to go ahead and log into JDE. And in addition, we'll log into Salesforce and take a look at that too. All right, so in the address book, 4242. So there's the mailing address line 1, 75 Executive Way. In addition, let's log into Salesforce and take a look at that too. 4242, and there's the 75 Executive Way. So let's go back to our application. There's 75, and assuming I did everything correctly up until this point, by changing this value and hitting update, we should update both of those fields. There's my update successful message. I should be able to go back here, refresh. We've updated Salesforce. JDE is a little bit different. I have to exit out and come back in. There's my 70 Executive Way here. So we've, in about 20 minutes or so, set up a form that can go ahead and update JDE and Salesforce at the same time with one click. And that kind of finishes part 1 of this. Part 2 is going to be setting, or part 3, I guess. I technically already defined part 1. Part 3 is going to be setting up that order link that we saw. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to my web part quickly. We are done with this web part, so I'm going to close it out. And we're done with Salesforce and JDE, so I'm going to close those out as well. On this web part, this is where we're going to add our link. So I'm going to show you how to add a link to a list that exists already. We're going to go ahead and add another column, and I need to give it a label for a header. And I need to go ahead and give it another hyperlink because we're going to use that to open up our window. So for the label, all I need to do is, I can retitle it. I don't have to, but no reason not to, just to keep it clean. I also need to update the name. There we go. And then for the hyperlink, we're going to go ahead and open up a new web part, and we'll create that. In this IDE, all I need to do is put in the name of the web part as the navigate URL to go ahead and link over to it. So for this, we're going to go ahead and name it account orders. When I create that web part, that's what we're going to name it. And then we're not going to open a new window. Yeah, I mean, this should be good. I do need to give it text so that we have something appear on the hyperlink when we click it. And lastly, I need to go ahead and set up those parameters the same way we set them up before. So what you're going to see with this part of the demo is a lot of the same ideas that we just learned put into practice to make something a little bit more complicated. So again, we're going back to our data source. Again, we're doing the inquire and the address book number passing through. Okay. So let's go back and create a new web part. And we're going to go ahead and name that account orders. And we are going to use this as a web page, so we're going to go ahead and leave that checked. Right, so let's go ahead in and design this. Same thing, we're going to go ahead and put up our query string. we're going to create a new data source. Go into our data source. So for this data source, we're actually going to create it as a join query to the sales order tables. So we pull in the inquire and hook that up. I'm going to use my query builder to go to F4201, drag that in, and F4211 to get those lines. I'm going to hook up the 3 primary keys here and save and close to get my query. I then need to have my key of the address book number that we're looking up. So the column we're going to be using for that is going to be that SHAN8 value. And then under values, we're going to use the query string. So now when I click that link, it should load up this data from JDE. Last thing I need to do is pull my results, and we're going to have 5 of them. And to save myself some time from having to filter through this list and find them all, I'll pull an order number since we're going to use that one, but I'm going to go ahead and type in the rest. And the ones that we're going to end up using here are the order number, the line item, so LITM, the amount in the order, the the order date, DJ, and the next status, so that we can report on that. And actually, I spoke too soon. The last thing we're going to do is actually set up the order by, because I only want to see orders as they pertain to the most recent, to the last one. So I can just go ahead and fill that out. So this is, standard order by from the query. So the date descending. So I'll go back to my Webparts. Again, we're going to go ahead to the data sources and pull the inquire in to create the list. We're not going to go ahead and change any of the controls. We want them all to be labels, but I can go ahead and make this nicer and update all the descriptions for the fields so everybody knows what we're looking at. This is order dates, and then this last one is going to be status. So I'm going to go ahead and create the list, and with that done, we should be able to, let's try and test it so I can show you what we've made so far. So if I come back to our user here, let me try that again. There we go. Filter, mess with that a little bit. So if I click on order, so this is the list that we currently built, our order number, item number, order quantity, etc. So these are the fields and the data coming directly from JDE. So I want to clean this up a little bit. Obviously, the order date is in JDE format. The status code is just the status code. To do that, we have a bit of a helper here. So there's my order date. And if I go down to where the text is coming in, I can actually give it a value transformation. We have some helpful rules here that can be used. So this is the date. I can go ahead and click on this and convert from JDE date. So this is a really helpful pre-made function. Okay, 1 second. Let me try this one more time. Hold on, let me try a different one. So if I try the status, let me try status. The value transformation for status. So I convert from a UDC, sorry, to a UDC description. So in this case, I know what the UDC is for this value. It's 4080. Yeah, I'm not sure what's happening here. Sorry about that. I guess we're not going to be able to see the value transformation. Let me refresh the web page. Let's try that. Let's see, since I just created the form, maybe I can go ahead and get this to come in. So we converted to a description, 4080, No. Looks like there's some bug that snuck in here. I'm sorry about that, everybody. But yeah, we have that value transformation working on the primary web part. I can go ahead and show you that there. So if we skip over that, I'm going to go ahead and show off the styling because you know, we have that styling on the status code. Instead, let's put it on the item this time since we don't have that nice description coming in. So I'm going to scroll down to the bottom and go to Style. Now, if I go ahead and click on the CSS Style Helper, I actually have a nice style property form that I can click through and do different things to the form. In this case, I'm just going to set the style for the color on the text. I'm going to go ahead and set the weight of the text. And that should be good. Let's go ahead and hit Save and Close. So if I go back to my user, I refresh. Now we can see that our item number has that green style. It's been bolded. And I can do that to any of the fields on the form. All right, so the next piece is we wanted to put in that search functionality onto this. So if I go ahead and, again, just create a new cell for my search to go into and add a table at the top. This time I do want it to be a 2x2. So I have my button. I need two text boxes, one for the order number and one for the date. So in this case, we're going to go ahead and update the names so we can keep them straight. So this is going to be the order filter, and this one's going to be the date filter. Again, we need our button to just refresh that data source once we get it set up, so I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Add my data source. Just added one too many. There's the data source that we created. Pull that in. So that should be done. Go over to my data source, and I need to set up my filters. Actually, one thing I did miss here, we are going to set up that helper. So there's a little calendar helper piece that lets you kind of quickly fill in the field with the correct formatting. To do that, I need to go down to the helper properties here. So I'm going to have it be a modal window. I want to turn help on. The image I want help to use is that date selector image. And the help type I need it to be is calendar. So that's pre-built into the IDE and just one way to kind of keep all your date fields the same across your application. So if I go into my data source, I do have to do a couple steps here. For one, you saw that that date was coming in as the JDE format, and therefore we need to put it back in to the query as the JDE format. So we would have translated it anyway, and I'll go through the steps to make that happen, even though it's not being currently transformed. So what I need here, is the service to translate to JDE date. So if I have a date coming in month, day, year, or however, if you're using the European format the other way around, we have date services that let you go ahead and alter the date however you need. So I have a service here that's convert to JDE date. I'm going to go ahead and put that in front of my inquiry so I can use that in the inquiry itself and hook this up. So this is looking for it in a year, month, day format so it can do the proper conversion for me. And on the page, and actually let me go ahead and, well, on the page we would have it in the day, month, year format. I'm sorry, month, day, year. So I want to go ahead and alter that. So we have a couple functions on the right here that help out with some of these things that we've kind of pre-built into the system. And get EP short date is exactly this format and how we need it. So I can go ahead and pull that function in. Now it needs to be told what value we want to translate it to. And to tell it how to do that, or which value to transform, I'm going to come to my web inputs, and the one that we're going to transform is that date filter that we set up. So what I need to do is grab the variable for the date filter and just go ahead and put it into my formula and remove this excess code, and now we're done. So now when that date filter comes into my process, we're going to run a function against it that will translate it to the proper format for me for this service to use it. If I go back to my inquiry, I need to start adding the keys again for my filters. I need 2 more. Perfect. So we're going to filter against the order number. Oops, sorry, this one, order number. And the value is going to come from that web input. Oh, sorry, order filter. This is why I name things, so I don't lose them. I do need to ignore blanks, so we're going to go ahead and put true. And the last one is going to be that date filter. And in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and, oh, there it is. Column, the value is going to be, sorry, we don't want to use date filter. We want to use the service I set up, which is here. So now that service is outputting these in any format that I need. And actually what I want to do is make sure this is set up correctly. So we could hit a situation where perhaps we pass something in and it may end up not being blank all the time. So I want to set up the situation so that my query is always correct and it always is blank when my filter is blank. So what I just did is I clicked on date filter, and on the bottom we have some XSL functions that we can use to set up this service and do some additional logic on top of what the service is doing. So it chooses, it's going to let me do a couple scenarios here beforehand and set it up so it does what I want properly. So I'm just going to clean this up to make it a little easier to see. So in this case, when the date filter is blank, I don't want it to pass anything to my query. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it as blank. But if it's not blank, I do want to pass in that JDE date so we can filter off of it. So now that is all set up, I want to ignore blanks again, set that to true. And that should be it. I believe we went ahead and got everything there. So if I go back, now because that value transformation didn't end up working for us, these search filters, at least on the date, are not going to be so useful. Oh, you know what, I missed the button again. Let me go back and set that up. We do need to have the text on the search button. There we go. And I'm going to go ahead and set that width so it's with its partners. There we go. So this is that helper that we set up. Pull up that calendar helper. Go ahead and click on that, and it'll pull the date back for me. And this is the order number filter that we set up here at the top. So I should be able to go ahead and type in an order and hit search, and there ahead go ahead and pull that in. But yeah, I can very quickly switch back over so you can see the original application. Move this out of the way. So if I go ahead and log in with the application that we started with, so if I go to 4242, that user that we were using, so there's those value transformations in action, translating the date and translating that status and the style.
And from a mobile perspective?
Absolutely, yeah. Let me go ahead and show the mobile perspective off. So if I do in Google Chrome, I'll pull that up. So this would be the mobile layout of the page. And if our list got longer, either way, we could drag left and right to kind of view each field. But in this case, everything kind of fits on the screen, so it's all good. Yeah, other than that, I believe that is the end of this demonstration.
Jeremy, great job. And with live demos, sometimes you do have glitches, and we'll make sure that we send a separate link to a recording that shows the proper date edits and
date status, yeah,
and the status of that. We did have a couple of questions. I'm here with our Chief Technology Officer. Suman, some questions did come in. Did you want to answer those?
Yeah, so I'm going to pull up the questions here, and let me give a minute here. So one of the questions was, still pulling up.
Well, Suman is bringing up the questions, Jeremy. Are you still showing your screen?
Yes.
Okay. I don't think you are.
Right. Do you want me to do?
Yeah. Show.
I got it.
Okay.
So one of the question is, if you have a customer where they want to send some data, like XML or JSON data through through web services to you to process a purchase order or to create a purchase order or an AP or an AP voucher inside JDE Webparts. So how you do it with our platform. So the answer is that yes, you can do it with what we call creating the REST endpoint. You saw how Jeremy was using the business functions and creating the processes. So those processes can be exposed as REST endpoints, accepting data in a proper JSON format that your trading partner, your customer, can send it through as a purchase order. And then you can call the business functions and create the purchase order or the AP transactions on that basis. The second question was, if we are changing the address book record, are we updating the audit records? So the answer is yes. Of course, we are calling the business function. So business function will use the account that's being set up to call the business functions. Now, depending upon your installation, how you want to set it up, if we are using a service account, then the audit records will be done with a service account. If we are using if you want to use the single sign-on or use the JDE Webparts account of the user who is logging in, then we can also use that particular person account and update and use the audit record properly. So both of those scenarios are possible.
Very good. Thanks, Suman. Jeremy, can you show your screen? We have a couple of other questions related to just the overall basic functionality, there we go, of the software. And one was services. Now, you showed for the purpose of the business case and demo use case scenario, a database inquiries, obviously a commonly used service. You showed Salesforce.com as a service. But can you just touch on, we have 450 services out of the box. When we need to create new services, our development team simply creates new services like years ago. What, Suman, an example of that is FTP, right? Our first version didn't have FTP, and we created that service. So we have a question about just explaining all the built-in services with Easy Process. Go ahead, Jeremy.
Right, so along the left-hand side here on the process canvas, you see a number of services, and these are packaged up in different workshops. We have database services, the date and time services. Now, doing a normal application, you may use 10% of these, 15% of these. There are definitely some in here that are very specific to a task, but there's some common ones. We did the inquire. In here we have evaluate.
Email is a common service, right?
We have email services, a whole bunch of them. Sending an email, we can send a web part as an email. The system can actually receive emails if you give it a mailbox to monitor and pull the emails in and parse them and do things with them. And
that's a good point. We have a customer that wanted workflow extending out to their suppliers for like price validation approval. And we talked about FTP or using the email, where we're in the background recognizing that there's been a response and picking up the email flow from there, right?
Yeah. I have one more question which I would like to answer to everyone,
sure,
given the type of the question. What is a typical learning curve for a business analyst to learn your product and create mobile apps that integrate to JDE? And that's basically what you saw was an example of a business application, running through mobile, updating JDE Webparts. A typical training that we have, it's online. It's also something that you can do as self-training. As basically we give you an access to a tenant where you can log in. You have access to everything that Jeremy just showed, and you go through our training, which is a set of six or seven videos. And depending upon how fast you want to go through, you're looking at going through that video in a couple of days to at most a week, and then you can basically do everything that Jeremy was showing.
Yeah, assuming you're hooked up to your JDE,
and you can pull up that EP docs. You just go to the EP docs.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have documentation tied to everything inside of the IDE. So if I hit my help function, it will take me to my EP docs website, which explains exactly what I just clicked on. So,
and this is a public URL.
So anybody can go to epdocs.krsystems.com and pull up our manual. So I clicked help on the convert to JDE service, and this is what it pulled up for me. It explains the service, what it does, all the fields and things that come out of it. And you can do that for anything. The manual is here. It has different chapters on web pages, web parts, etc. that you can go through.
And the manual is linked to Easy Process, the IDE, the process canvas, the web part.
Yeah, that's what I just did. So
yeah.
I can do that here in a web part if I wanted to. Go ahead and click on a label. That's going to open up the label reference for me, and it's going to tell me all about it and what it does.
There are a couple of more questions. One question is, can you share the demo version? If by that question, if you mean that can you have access to the demo version for you to play this, on your own? Yes, that's possible. That's you can follow up with us or with Grant, and he can provide more information. But everything that you see is available as a POC in the cloud for you to try on, along with our videos. Another question we have is, can you create a single-page application? I guess you're asking about if you can you create a Gmail type of application with this, where you stay on a page and execute everything inside a page. The best way I can answer this is you should then utilize our REST APIs. So you can create this application and create REST APIs, and then you can create you can use some single page application framework out there to create, like Google Angular or so, to create a single page application. Lutron is a very good example. They did exactly the same thing and use our platform just for REST API, REST API's endpoints.
Good point. And Suman, was that all the questions?
That's all the questions.
Okay, and then the one last question was workflow. Can you we have another app, scratched app scenario dealing with vendor onboarding. There's workflow in that, but rest assured the canvas is there. Jeremy's going to show it. We're running out of time. I'm turning it over to Grant right now, who will finalize the webinar content. Go ahead, Grant.
Sure. There's actually one other question that gets asked often is, you use the business functions here. Can you use JDE Orchestrator? And the answer to that question is yes, we can. We like the business functions, but we love Orchestrator as well. So if you love Orchestrator, we can do all the things that you're looking for. Regarding workflow, I don't know where Jeremy's taking this, but I think he's showing you the workflow page.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. And actually, on the lower right-hand corner, it's probably worth circling just for fun on the IDE itself.
Oh, right here, yeah.
But that little blue dot, that actually gives you access directly to our support tables and our support line. So we're very much interested in hearing from people and getting feedback. So when you're in the IDE, that blue dot is everywhere. Not only is the question mark that Jeremy showed, but the blue dot is also, that'll give you live chat access to our support team. So there's a lot of ways to contact us when you're using the product and learning the product. We'll be happy to share more with that at a later date. But I do thank you guys for taking all the time that we had today. If you have further questions, our email.
There is one question I want to address. Somebody is asking if we have source change management control. And if Jeremy or Suman can answer that real quick.
Within the IDE, there's source change between the environments. We can set it up custom, but by default, we set it up through a DV, a QA, and a production environment system. And each one is kept with its own type of versioning. When you go ahead and you check out a web part from production into DV, you can make your changes, and then they get promoted through to each stage environment until you get it back up to production, and then it's back in a stable state.
Very good. Thank you. Go ahead, Grant, and summarize.
All right. Well, thank you. We want you guys to be the team of yes. We'll follow up with you. You guys will get all the recordings. And if you have any questions, please reach out. I'm grant.smith@krisystems.com. Jeremy is jeremy.stowe. You can see on the screen at krisystems.com. Have a great long weekend. I look forward to hearing your feedback.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.